Hey, kia ora whānau. Ko Steve-o, taku ingoa, married to the lovely Amy, clearly, and, clearly. Anyway, we get the joy of being the lead pastors here together. This beautiful faith community that is just seeking to advance the revolution of aroha that Jesus began, and it's a joy. This is a great faith community. Have you worked that out yet? Yeah. Whoa. That was quiet. Hey, this is a great faith community. Have you worked that out yet? That's a little bit better. Yeah. Oh, good stuff. I love the lighting of candle, and I love the Advent journey. It's a season of re-preparing and reminding ourselves that Jesus is coming. And there's an eschatological sort of deal that happens. You kind of read that last verse of that prayer, as we prepare our hearts for your arrival. And you kind of go, well, hasn't he already arrived? Yes. And is he still yet to come back? Yes. So it is a celebration of he has come, but it's also a looking forward to his return. So it's beautiful, right? Good. Okay, anyway. Peace, though. Let's have a look. I'm going to climb into this message. I'm excited about this, part 2, really, of a mini-series within this Advent series from last Sunday, and Ruth and Naomi. Peace, though. I was thinking about this. Amy asked me if she could have a little peace and quiet while she was cooking dinner the other night. So I took the battery out of the smoke detector. It didn't happen. All right, wow. I've got a heckler on the front row. Boo, that was terrible. I hate it. Actually, it's not bad. Yeah, I think it's quite good. Anybody else grow up with Muppet Show? No, I didn't say did we grow up with Muppets, and I was like, but if the shoe fits, I guess. The Muppet Show. I was reading this story this week, and I thought this was quite interesting. Just again thinking about the idea of peace. There was a monk, and he was part of a specific monastery, and as per his oath of silence, he was only allowed to say 2 words every year at a set time. And after his first year there, he comes before the head abbot to speak his 2 words, and he says, "Better food." The head abbot understands, obliges to the monk, hiring a new chef to improve the food quality of the monastery. After another year, the monk appears for his next 2 words and says, "Warmer blankets." The head abbot gets right on it and purchases some new blankets for the monk. The next year, he appears again for his 2 annual words and says, "I quit." To which the head abbot replies, "Well, good. All you've done since you've got here is complain." Which made me think, wouldn't that be an amazing way to raise a family? 2 words a year, guys. No. Anyway, so mine just goes on tracks like that. But I'm pretty sure we invented this game. We have a little bit, it turns out that we are a little bit competitive in our household. Not so much me, just other people. Stop it. Anyway, so we came up with this game at one point because, we found out that incentivizing or by competition was helpful to get kids on board, which turns out in the long run that's not necessarily the best idea. Anybody know what I'm talking about there? All right. So anyway, we were like, well, let's play this game that you can't talk, and the first person who talks, they're out. And then the next, the person who can go the longest without talking is the winner. Hey, anybody played that? Have you ever played that in your family? We invented it. Yes. No. So anyway, we called it the No Talking Game, which is quite an original name. And it lasted for us as a family, like on a good day, it would last like 30, 40 seconds. Thought I was going to say minutes. No. So, but anyway, the idea of silence and peace are kind of connected here. Anyway, we're going to sort of develop this thought as we go through. And I think one of the mistakes that we make when it comes to peace is that we consider peace, and we'll look at the biblical definition of peace. It's a little bit different to self-help and different spirituality that you might read of today outside of Christianity, in that often there's this idea of somehow removing anxiety, removing worry, kind of getting rid of those things. And actually, peace in the Bible is the presence of something or the presence of someone. We'll look at that. Very, very different. Anyway, so Isaiah 9, verse 6. Let me just give you 3 passages of scripture as we get into the subject this morning. Isaiah 9, verse 6. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So one of the names of Jesus, Prince of Peace. John 14:27, Jesus said, Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Ephesians 2:17, he came and preached peace to you who were far away, and peace to those who were near. I'm going to speak this morning on the idea of engaging in a new chapter. Let me just pray. Jesus, I want to thank you that you came for us to bring peace. And I pray that you would help us in this season to resist the temptation to get caught up in so many different distractions and the busyness of really helpful, important things as well. But in the midst of it, our lives may truly be centered upon you, Jesus. We ask in your name. Amen. Well, look, last Sunday I looked a little bit, it was called A New Hope and started just with the idea of Star Wars, a little bit in the mix of that. Has anybody seen any of the Star Wars movies, by the way? Yes, 3. Wow. Oh, it's going up. We're not sure if we want it, all of the old ones, just the old ones. Okay, that's interesting. I love it. I love the whole lot. And I love some of the cartoon series. Actually, Rebels is particularly one of my favorite. The cartoon sort of episode, sort of Rebel, sort of just works for me. But time and time again, there was this idea last week. We talked about this new hope in a galactic empire that was overruled by a dark emperor. And there's this spark of hope begins to be rekindled. Talked about the importance of that. But one of the other themes as you look through the movie, and the whole story really, is the idea that, and probably best to say this in Chewy language, oh, well, 3 people appreciated that. Translated, the interpretation is that time and time again, they had to wrestle with, was there any point in doing anything, or was it just better to give up and sit back? And so there was this wrestle with, do we engage with the Rebel Alliance and try and believe for something different, or do we just accept the status quo and settle? And so this is the idea this morning, engaging in a new chapter I want to talk about. Now, if you're not into Star Wars movies, sorry about that. Let me try a different genre, just in case we might pick up some other people here. Anybody ever seen, it's quite an old movie now, but anyone ever seen Miss Congeniality? Yes. Okay, different demographic. Miss Congeniality is Sandra Bullock. Whoa, what's going on here? World Peace. Yes, you picked it. So, Miss Congeniality, Sandra Bullock, she's this hardcore FBI agent, and they find out a plot, this terrorism plot, and they want to stop the terrorists, but she has to go undercover and become a part of a beauty pageant contestant. And so she does that, and they do the whole thing, and apparently it's quite interesting and funny. Anyway, she gets to the part where they do the speeches, and one of the questions, Stanfield's the guy interviewing, and he says, the question is, what is the most important thing our society needs? And of course, all the girls come up and say, world peace. And it's world peace, and the next one, and it's world peace, and it's world peace. And then Sandra Bullock's character, Gracie Hart, comes up and says, he says, what's the most important thing our society needs? And she goes, that would be harsher punishment for parole violators, Stan. And everyone goes quiet And she's like, because she's had some coaching that she needs to soften things, she goes, and world peace. And everyone's like, so, anywho, moving right along quickly. The Hebrew word, now just a bit of history and a bit of lesson here. The Hebrew word, which the Old Testament largely is written in, is for peace, translated into the word peace, is the word shalom. Have you heard that before? Shalom. It's kind of like a greeting. It's kind of like a blessing, kind of all mixed into one. Mixed into one. It just sounded fascinating. I was trying to earwig there for a moment. The word shalom, though, doesn't really, it doesn't mean peace. So here's my point this morning, right? The word shalom doesn't mean peace in terms of absence of conflict, which is what we think that it might mean, or calmness, or just sort of like that inner peace sort of vibe that we pick up. Instead, shalom means a peace that is the result of, and only the result of, a right relationship with God, one another, and creation. So the concept of peace is a wholeness in all of life. In fact, in the Strong's Concordance, the word shalom would be translated as peace, completeness, welfare, well-being, safety, and prosperity. So the origin of the word, if you go a little bit deeper, is the root word shalom, which means to be complete. Did you know that? To be complete or to be sound. So the usage of the word shalom, peace, is used to describe a harmonious relationship between individuals and between God and therefore with the rest of humanity. And it also conveys this sense of wholeness or well-being, both physically and both spiritually. So when we are talking about peace, and Jesus is the Prince of Peace, it's not that everything is all smooth sailing and everything's gone calm all of a sudden, but it's the completeness of who God is entered into our lives, and we're receiving that and learning to walk in the wellness and the completeness and the inner sense of God. My relationship with God is being restored. My life, therefore, is being restored. And so I can interact with the world, the good, the bad, and the difficult, with a sense of God is with me, God is for me, and God will work all things together for good, right? So it's this rich, beautiful, powerful, profound idea that Jesus is not trying to say, like, let's get rid of anxiety and worry, but no, let me come with my presence and my completeness and be with you and restore right relationship and help you interact with the world in the way that I had in mind. So there's this restoration. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it's profound. And so we're saying today, as we light the candle, that Jesus has come into our lives and he is coming to complete the work that he has begun. And in the meantime, we're on this journey of entering in and discovering all that God has in mind. All right, we all right with that? So a little bit of just background. Let's kind of get on the same page with what we're talking about here today. All right, Ruth. We're going to turn to the book of Ruth this morning. Now, last Sunday we started here. This is it's one of my favorite, in fact, Old Testament books, because it's just an incredibly beautiful, rich story of and a foreshadowing of the gospel. I'm not going to do this book justice. We'll come back and do this as a book study at some point. There's so many metaphors that we could put in here, like it was written at the time of Judges. Just as a for example, it was written it's a story that happens at the end of Judges as a foreshadow that the nation was going, we need a king, and part of God's healing was through bringing a king, but it's foreshadowing that king being Jesus, and all this is going on. But it was actually written and put in document at the time of the return of the exiles. And so Nehemiah was rebuilding the walls. But at the end of Nehemiah, if you read it, it's a fascinating book because he does some great things. And at the end, he kind of loses the plot a little bit. He starts pulling people around the city by the hair. And then he's got this big thing. You've got to get the Moabite family out. If you married a Moabite, get them out. And at the time that's happened, and he thinks he's doing God's will with that part, but at the time that happens, this book appears how God brings a Moabite into the story of Jesus. It's fascinating, like a subversive Bible at its best, like counterculture, counter-religious legalism at its best. Anyway, I love it. Okay, Ruth. Now, the start was bitter. Naomi and her husband Elimelech go out, leave Israel in a time where there was a famine, and so they moved from trusting God, moved into, we're going to take this into our own hands. And they go out, they have 2 sons, their sons married, the sons die, and Elimelech dies, and Naomi is like, my life was full and now it's empty. She hears that God had returned to Israel bringing bread. She goes back, the 2 daughter-in-laws start going with her, and she says, probably no point. But Ruth says, well, I'm just going to go anyway. We'll look at that passage in a moment. And she gets back to Israel and they say, it's Naomi. They're excited. And she's like, well, don't call me Naomi because Naomi means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter. I went out full. I came back empty. And so she gets in chapter 1 in this place of deep bitterness and anguish. But it's not the end of her story. It's the end of the first chapter. By chapter 4, God has slowly, little by little, taken Ruth and her daughter-in-law, Naomi, on this beautiful journey and brings them into the greatest love story, part of the story of the line of David, which would be part of the story of Jesus' arrival. It's this incredible restoration. And so I talked last Sunday, and you can check it out online on one of our platforms, but I talked about how there was this little by little, this rekindling of hope that went on, and you see little glimpses of it in Naomi's language, this little rekindling of hope, or a sense of a reawakening of an expectation that God is still good, and God can make the end of my story, even though I can't see it. And all I can see is chapter 1, and chapter 1 looks terrible. The story isn't over. And even though I can't see how he could possibly do it, God is capable of painting a beautiful story. And so it's like, don't write yourself out of the story that God is trying to write you into. Don't assume that what has happened thus far is going to be the defining part of your life. What is ahead is yet ahead, and God sees the beginning and from the end. We don't. So we come to these conclusions too soon about what our life is going to be. Anyway, so there you go. There's some food for thought. But I just love that idea that there was a famine. The Lord had come back to Israel. And it's kind of like, as far as Revolution's journey, that's why we've embarked on this journey this year, and we're going to continue it next year to wrestle with it, to clarify it, to see God move. It's kind of like there's been challenges, and we've become aware that in the church in the West, maybe we're doing some things a little bit funky and all that sort of stuff. But at the heart of this, the Lord, I reckon prophetically, the Lord is bringing bread back to the church, His presence, His potency, His power. The what's ahead for the church is beautiful and profound. And I just kind of, my mind, with the COVID journey, I'm like, let's change everything. Let's change the systems and structures and methods. And I've just felt over this recent sort of period of time, it's just like God's been saying, Steve, I just want you to change your heart. And that's where we're at as a church. We're like, we're maybe things will change and other strategies and stuff, but really what we're really going to change, we're changing our heart. God, we want to come back to this place that it's all about you, it's all about the gospel and the gospel renewal. And can we center our lives and build the community around the gospel? Now, this story is a beautiful story of restoration, and it takes time. And it's God's heart to restore our lives. Now, little side issue, not so little and not so side issue, but let me just talk about it quickly. Because whenever you're talking about pain and difficulty and God working all things together for good, somewhere along the lines, this question comes up, and it should come up. And the question I get asked often by people is, how could a loving God actually allow suffering in the world? Why does he allow these difficult things to happen? If he could stop it, if he's all-powerful. And it's a really good question. However, there are two difficult things or problematic things with that question. Number one is that there's an assumption. We go, well, I can't see any good reason that God would allow suffering in the world. So we make the conclusion that because we can't see a good reason, there is no good reason. Or because someone can't give us a satisfactory answer, there is no satisfactory answer. So what have we done there? We've concluded that our ability to understand our intellect is better than the possibility that God knows better, and for whatever reason that he hasn't yet let us know, he hasn't defined it to us. So that's the problem. First problem with the question, why, if there was a loving God, how could bad things happen? The challenge with that question is that our own intelligence has become a defense. The second challenge with that question is if you want to go, okay, let's go down that track, therefore there could not be a God, what you're going to wrestle with now is you're going to have to wrestle with how to explain injustice in the world without God and why you think justice would be important. Because if we go with Darwinism, that life is about the survival of the strongest, you have no basis for justice or injustice to say that there is actually a problem with suffering. So while I can't tell you what God's reasoning is, what I can tell you is that he cares deeply about injustice. A little side issue. I'll move on from that, eh? So there's a renewal of expectation. It's good to think about these things, eh? I'm like, oh. Okay. There's a renewal of expectation. Now, let me pick up just a few verses from the end of the book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 4. And this is how it finishes. This is profound. Verse 14. Verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive a son, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, now Ruth has the child. The mother-in-law, Naomi, this is what they say to Naomi. Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer or a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout all of Israel. He will... renew your life. I just can't not be moved by this because this is speaking prophetically of Jesus in my life. He will renew your life. And sustain you in your old age. What a great promise to hold on to. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. So Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. And the woman living there said, Naomi has a son. And they called him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. Okay, rich. Powerful. Hopeful for any of us who feel like there's a need for our lives to be renewed. But this doesn't just happen mysteriously. This isn't just one day God turns up and does everything out of the blue. This is, if we back up, this is a journey of Ruth and Naomi coming back to. We're just going to look at this. These are the words I'm going to use this morning. There was a renewed engagement from Naomi and then Ruth. I think that's on the screen. A renewed engagement. Now, the word engaged means to occupy the attention and efforts of a person. So here's the question. How will you and I engage in God's heart for the renewal of our lives, for the wholeness of our lives, for the completeness, peace, shalom of our lives? How will we engage? Well, let me just show you a couple of snapshots of what the journey looked like for Ruth and Naomi. Chapter 1, let's just skip back there. Verse 15. Well, firstly, there was a potential off-ramp. And look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and back to her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. This is profound. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. Where you are buried, I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and I. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Just backing up the truck, we started at the start. It's a terrible situation. The end is beautiful and wonderful in God's heart for renewal. And they begin to engage with it. And here we see a snapshot in this transition that Ruth, the daughter-in-law, is saying to Naomi, well, I'm not going to leave you by yourself in this. And so Ruth begins to engage. Now, there's this powerful, I haven't got time to unpack the power of the covenant that is made there and what it means in the context of the gospel as far as engaging with God's great purposes. But it's profound. It's profound. But you see here this desire to engage. They've heard God's come back. We're going to go. And Ruth's going, I'm going to engage too. There's this engagement snapshot that you see. It's powerful. We live in a day where so many people are disengaging with their faith, which, by the way, we're going to see turn around in our day, right? So many people are disengaging with faith. We live in a secular day. We live where postmodernism has influenced so much of our thinking and created what sociologists call an immanent frame, that life is just about what I see, smell, or touch. And we wonder why, when we go down that track as a society, so many people are struggling with the transcendent issues of life. What about meaning? What about purpose? What about something greater? But if all society does is begin to orientate around the immediate and your clothes and your food, and you've got to work to have a house and all that sort of stuff, even as Jesus followers, we often get pulled into that and kind of like, well, I've just got to get through my day. And then every now and then, I don't know, maybe once a week, we think, oh yeah, Jesus, let's worship him. Even the pull of culture is to get us to disengage with our faith. And so there's this battle, right? Have we seen that? God, the beauty of the gospel is restored relationship with God through Jesus' great sacrifice. And it's not just about, I'm grateful we're here today, don't get me wrong, but it's not just about this. What about tomorrow, walking aware of the presence of God and his leading and guiding and prompting and his desire to walk with you and encourage you and support you, and your ability to bless his heart any given day and be his hands and feet in the world and in the workplace there's just so much more, right? But we just get pulled into this, just living in the natural world. And we've got to fight that. The conversation around church and faith, and deconstruction, which is incredibly helpful in the right context of, we realize we wake up, there's unhealthy parts of my faith. And instead of, kind of just trying to pull deconstruction down to renovate, we end up destroying parts of our faith. Well, and it's kind of like, well, it's all in the too hard basket, so I'll just chuck the whole lot out, and we throw out the baby with the bathwater, and I'm guilty of that too. So we've got that part of the journey. I'd encourage us all to look at the unhealthy parts of our faith, but hold on, embrace the journey and allow God to rebuild and renovate. There's consumerism that creeps in. We're in a consumeristic, again, just talking about things that cause us to disengage as society in faith. And the reality that God's peace, completeness, well-being, wholeness is there. It's a gift, but we've got to partner with and unfold it in our lives. So consumerism is part of that. We get this idea that we're so used to going to a restaurant and it's like, well, I'm here and I'm going to pay you, so I need I should have your attention, and my cup was dirty, take it away, whatever. And a restaurant mentality. Like, bring me my food. I've been waiting. Quickly, hurry up. We get that. The problem is if we bring that into our faith journey, we're in trouble because God doesn't operate to our time frames. And God isn't the great meter of all of our needs because you are God and He is your servant. He's God. We get the joy of loving and serving Him. And so then we bring that into church and we're like, I just want prepackaged instant connection and I don't have to pay the price to do anything. Or, or just want a program that serves my particular needs or something like that. There's a difference between church in the world, mindset, consumerism, and I turn up to a restaurant, but actually the body of Christ is a family. Yeah. And so when I turned up on the first Christmas to the Donaldson household, on Christmas Day, and there's this massive meal laid out, and they chuck me a tea towel. Yeah. Good man. Well, hang on a minute. No, you need to seat me and wait on me. How dumb would that be? Right. They chuck me a tea towel because you're part of the family now. And the family do the dishes. No, I want this to be a restaurant, thank you. No, so, I get a tea towel. And I don't complain about my tea towel. Because that's family. I'm not there to wait on my needs. I'm there to be part of this beautiful expression of an incredible family. And going from a family where there was 3 siblings and, a lot of them that liked being by themselves, to going to Amy's family with 6 siblings who were loud. That was a bit of adjusting. Ruth 2, let me show you one more snapshot. There's this engagement. They begin to engage. Ruth 2, verse 2. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go into the fields and pick the leftover grain behind anybody in whose eyes I have found favor. And Naomi said, go ahead, my daughter. She went out and entered the fields and began to glean behind the harvests. And as it turned out, she was working in the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Now, what you miss there, if you don't know the context, is widows. God's always had a special place in His heart for widows and orphans, and He wrote it into their rules. Don't harvest your field right to the edges and take everything. Leave the edges so that the widows and orphans can come and be looked after. Ruth and Naomi, they begin to engage. They go back. Naomi's got this thing of covenant relationship going on. And then she goes, and that thing about entering into God's heart to provide for us. I'll go do that, eh? Yeah. They're engaging. And it just happened to turn out that she was in the field of the kinsman redeemer that could bring them back into wholeness, completeness, shalom, peace. So, this isn't a God reveals all sort of a situation. Oh, you're coming back to me, Naomi, that's good. Let me tell you how it's going to work out. This was you're coming back to me. Great. Engage with my provision for you. And as it happened, there are a lot of moments that almost look accidental in our lives. But in the final analysis, we get to see how God has been weaving through it. Here's my theory as to why God doesn't give us the full plan right from the start, right from the get-go, that I would actually prefer. It's because then we would trust the plan and try and make it happen ourselves, rather than engaging with Him, waiting on Him, and trusting Him in the journey. So the question is, how am I engaging with God in my journey, in His plan for peace for me? It's a gift that we need to receive and unwrap. Here at Revolution Church, we talk about 4 core values, rhythms with God being the first one, this idea of knowing and being with God, this idea that God waits to be wanted and shows up to those who seek him. It's the great paradox of Christianity, that he says, seek me and you'll find me, the God who has already come to us. So we talk about building personal rhythms, engaging. We talk about building together rhythms, engaging. I'm going to send this out in an email this week because I thought I'd talk through this a bit more. I'll send out an email to our church, and I want you to use this as a bit of a grid reference to reflect over the Christmas break on how are you doing engaging with God's journey for you. Personal rhythms, prayer, scripture, silence, solitude. Together rhythms, worship, fellowship, teaching, and more. Then a second core value is deep transformation, becoming who God created us to be. So that's the healing from the impact of the past, the renewal of the mind, inner healing, holistic spirituality. And then there's growing in Christ-like character, which is maturity, fruit of the Spirit. How are you engaging with that? How am I engaging with that? Our third value is everyday mission, that we are bringing Jesus to our world. It's a lifestyle of love, representing Jesus everywhere we go. It's understanding that we're called and empowered, which is vocational, it's family, it's how we approach marriage or singleness. It's God is calling us and empowering us in those areas of our life. How are you doing there? Authentic community. This idea is our fourth core value of journeying together. It's about being known and needed. Known in that the real me is seen, safe, and supported to grow. And needed in that we all have a part to play in making disciples of the nations. How will I engage in the journey that God's got for me? Now, Naomi and Ruth is the story of all of our lives. That we all, at some point, take matters into our own hands and try and work out our lives. My experience, at the age of 14, feeling bitterly disappointed with God for what He'd allowed to happen in my life. Still remember the day I went out into the field and shook my fist at God. You don't care about me. I can do a better job with my life. Keep it short, 4 years of going from bad to worse. You've heard of the book Good to Great? I could write the story from bad to worse. 18, my heart was so hard towards God and people. And in 18, God gets my attention through a friend. I hear the gospel again. I am so sorry, God. Would you forgive me? And starts this incredible journey of little by little, piece by piece. And I am not there yet. But little by little, piece by piece, trusting Him. And He's putting the pieces back together. Oh, I pray for you, church. I pray for anybody who's watching online. I pray for us. I pray for the city, Otatahi. I pray for our nation. Let our hope and expectation be reawakened, not in our own ability, but there is a God who cares and loves deeply and is able to redeem, restore the most broken, hurting, and darkest parts of our lives. I pray that our engagement with His plan would be renewed. That we would find the way to take the little steps after the little steps, and somewhere in the mix of that journey, discover somewhere, somehow, as it turned out, God met us there. Church, would you stand with me? Just going to worship for a moment. I'm going to lead us into prayer soon, but actually we're just going to worship. We're going to sing this chorus for a little bit first. just to allow space for our hearts to respond to God and His presence. Maybe you can't even agree with these words, but let them be sung over you for a moment and let hope awaken. Let a desire to engage with God be renewed.